Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this one I'm going to show you how to do two-handed interactions, so weapons and other actors like that. It's kind of sponsored by the GDXR Ultimate VR template, the one that I've got on the marketplace that I've been working on. So if you don't want to sit down and build all of these blueprints, you can check this out and get access to it all through there. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to jump into the template because I've already got it set up. And for some reason we're compiling 5,000 shaders and the quality is terrible, but hopefully that means it won't crash. My scale's off as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to set up two-handed interactions so we can grab actors like so and rotate and fire, or at least rotate and zoom so you can see those and then play with it as you want. So let's put that down there, and the other example is a rifle that I've got in the project. Added physics to the hands and now speed of paint. There it is. Cool. So we can actually rotate, and this one works a bit better because it's wider, but you can see how it's much smoother and nicer than the other video that I've got. So you'll be able to play around with it a little bit more and hopefully get an idea of how it works. So what we're going to do is we're going to back out of this. We're then going to move this down. Actually, we'll close this one. We don't need it open. And I'm going to create a template. So we'll go to launch 5.1, go to virtual reality, and then we're going to create a new file. So I've already got one, so two-handed interactions. It's probably over 20 characters, so Unreal will shout at me. But if you want access to this project, once it's all done, you can head over to the Patreon, and you'll be able to download it there. Also, while I talk about it, make sure to head over to the Discord, so that way, if you've got any questions, you can ask those and join the other 2,000 plus people in there doing VR development, which is cool. So now that we've loaded our template, we need to look at 3 specific blueprints that already exist inside of the template for us. And those are inside of the VR template, blueprints, and the blueprint folder. So inside of this, we have a VR pawn, we have a grab component, and we have our pistol. We're going to use these to save some time and also allow you to duplicate stuff. So you'll get the idea of how this works. So what's going to happen is we're going to send information from our VR pawn to our grab component to our pistol or our actor. But in this case, we can't start with the VR pawn because the content that we need to add needs to exist inside of our grab component first. So we're going to jump into our grab component, and we're going to start by creating some new variables in here and event dispatchers. So what we want to do is, if you haven't used the grab component before, you have a bunch of functions in here and they tell it what to do. So essentially our player calls try grab, and then we attach it to our controller and we do a bunch of math. What we're going to do is we're going to pass some information from our try grab, our player. We're going to pass that through this blueprint, and then we're going to send it to our actor. And to start with this, we're going to rename a couple of things just to make it easy to understand. So on grabbed event dispatcher, we are going to rename this to first, and this will be our first hand on grabbed. And then we're going to do the same thing with our on dropped. So first on dropped. And if we do compile, we might get some errors, and it might be worth right clicking on the call first grabbed and just doing a refresh node. These don't have variables, so we don't need to worry about that just yet. But what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this and then pass through. Actually, what we'll do is on grab, let me just double check. Yeah, we're going to pass some variables through to this, so when we duplicate it, we don't have to do it twice. So select first on grabbed. We're going to go to the plus in the top right. And rather than Boolean, we're going to search for motion controller. And we want motion controller component object reference. So this is going to be our motion controller. And then we'll hit enter. And the second one is also going to be motion controller, but we're going to do motion controller. We're going to do that. And then on dropped can stay as it is. We don't really need to pass anything through there. So what you'll see now is you'll see that our call first on grabbed has updated. But if we compile now, we'll get an error. And rather than recreating it, we can right click and do that refresh nodes. And we're going to pass in our motion controller reference straight to this. And we will do the motion controller aim, but we'll do that in a minute. So from try grab, we want to make some room from our sequence. And in here, we're going to go to our components list and we'll search for our motion controller reference. We're going to get this, or at least we're going to set this, sorry. So we're going to get a reference to it so we can set it. And then we're going to have a new one. So duplicate. And this will be our motion controller aim, which we're also going to set. So what this is going to do is it's going to act as our first hand. When we grab something, we're going to set these variables to say this is the first controller we're interacting with. And that will connect to our sequence. You'll see that we haven't got any variables plugged in. So what we can do is we can set motion controller to our motion controller reference. And what might be worth doing just to save some headache is do first motion controller reference. And then first motion controller aim. Because we'll also need 2 more of these for our second controller. Plug that in like so. And for our try grab, we want a new input for motion controller. And this is again going to be our motion controller aim. And that's going to go through to our motion controller aim variable. So in here, we can pass that motion controller, so first motion controller aim, to our core first hand grabbed. So when we grab it, we set that information, we tell our first input or event dispatcher that we've got these references if we need them. We now need to get our first motion controller reference. We're going to get a reference of that and then we'll search is valid. So we're going to say if our first motion controller is valid, it means we're already holding this actor or this component. Then we can do the second one. So from exec to there is not valid. It's going to go through to our bottom set. And our is valid is going to go to a branch. It'll look a little bit messy, but it'll work. So for this branch, we're going to compare our motion controller that we're actually trying to grab with to our first motion controller reference. So we say, if these are the same, we're going to do nothing. But if they are, we're going to fire our sequence. And for the false is now where we're going to duplicate our references or our variables for the second motion controller. So we're going to right click on our first motion controller ref, delete the end, and we'll rename this to second. And then we're going to do the same thing for the aim. So duplicate, second motion controller aim, and we're going to get both of these and we're going to set them. And we'll do that from the false. So if our motion controller variable that's coming through is the same as our motion controller, then we don't want to do this. We just want to fire our sequence. But if it's not, it means it's our second controller, and we're going to set these variables. And both of these can plug straight into our motion controller and motion controller aim. We're then going to have a new event dispatcher, which we can't duplicate, but this is going to be our second on grab. And we'll do the same thing for second on dropped. And just like our first one, we're going to need 2 variables in this. So we're going to go to plus, motion controller, and then motion controller aim. So we'll do motion controller, and then motion controller aim. Cool. So second on grabbed, we're going to drag that in, and we're going to call this binding. And then we're going to hook these up. So second motion controller aim. This isn't used, but it's good to have as the reference if you need it. And from there, we're going to say is held. So we'll copy this boolean here. And we're going to copy the return node is held also. Hook them up like so. So now we can do compile, and that should be fine for our try grab. But now what we want to do is set up our try release. Once we've done this, I'll come back through and I'll do a step-by-step of what's actually happening. It's kind of like an end project overview. And now we can actually set up the try release. So the first thing we're going to do is a branch. And for our try release, we actually want to create a new input. And this is also going to be a motion controller. So motion controller. And then we want to get our second motion controller reference. So get, we're going to do a check to see if these are equal. So if the controller releasing is equal to the second motion controller that's actually attached still, then we can tell it to do something, and that will be to call the second hand. So from true, we're going to call that second hand on dropped. So if our motion controller is equal to the second controller coming through, it means we're dropping the second controller. And then we're going to clear our second motion controller reference and our motion controller aim, because we don't need those variables set anymore. And what we want to do in this case, what I'm going to do is, so if we release with our first hand, or if we release with our second hand, we're going to snap it back to our first position. So our first hand, so we're going to actually call try grab. So try grab, I'm going to call that through. And we're going to set that to our motion controller reference and our motion controller aim. So first motion controller aim, like so. So basically say once the second hand is released, we're gonna grab it again with the initial hand. That allows us to snap it back to position without having to do a bunch of math. And from there, we're going to return or copy our return node. Say released. And then it's a case of just setting up our false channel to go to our sequence. And before we leave this, what we want to do is call first dropped. We're going to call our motion controller. So first motion controller reference. We're going to clear this. So that's it for our try release function. Now I've done this correct and I haven't messed it up. That should be it for the grab component. Now what we need to do is kind of set information to go through from our main player. I forgot to do that first motion controller reference. That would have been a mistake. So we go through. So now what we can do is we can go to our player. So VR pawn. This is where we get our grab component. And then we check to see if we're actually holding something. So it is tempted to work on both of these at the same time, but what we're going to do is we're going to move our held component. So we're going from completed to the release. And we're going to disconnect our held component left. We're going to do some stuff in between here. I might keep looking to the other monitor because I've got to remember how I did this. So we're going to get our held component left. So in our variables, we got components. We're going to get held component left because we're working on our left input. Then I'm going to search for second motion controller. So get second motion controller reference. Yep. And then we're going to right click on this pin and we're going to convert to valid get. So in here, when we try to release, we're going to see if our second motion controller is actually visible or has a reference set, which means we're holding it with two hands. And if we are, we're going to clear our second motion controller. So we're going to drag off this and do second. So set second motion controller. Wrong one. We want set. Set second motion controller reference is valid. And then we're going to try grab. So from this, we need to do held component left. Yep. Try grab. Plug that in afterwards. And we're going to get our other hand motion controllers. So motion controller right aim. And motion controller left. Motion controller right, sorry. Like so. So what we're doing is when we release with our left hand, we're checking to see if a motion controller for our second hand exists. If so, it means we're holding it with two hands. Then we're going to clear the second motion controller and then we're going to grab again, but with our opposite hand. So it means if we're holding the gun like so, if we're holding it with left hand, that's our aim. If we release it with the right hand from our trigger, it's going to snap to our left hand. We do that just so it feels nicer to the player and the user at the end. And then we feed that try grab straight into our held component left. But if the motion controller second is not valid, we're just going to clear that held component left at the end. So we're going to do that like so. And we're going to repeat the same thing down here. So we're going to get our held component right. Actually, let's move that to the end. So held component right, get. Then we get second motion controller reference, right click, convert to valid get from our true. If it is valid, we clear the second motion controller. So set second motion controller aim. Nope. Reference. Set second motion controller reference. It's more confusing when you're reading it out loud. True. And then we go to try grab from our held component right. Like so. And then we say we're going to switch to our left hand. So motion controller left aim. And motion controller left. With our try grab going through the held component. And then we're going to bypass this if we're only holding it with one hand. Don't know why I've got a custom event. Add reroute. Oh, false. Get this right, Jonathan. It's been a long day. Let's go like so. So second target motion controller go through like so. And before I forget, we want to do some stuff for this top row. And after I held component right, we're going to move these over. And we're going to check to see if second motion controller reference, so get second motion controller reference, is valid. Plug that in like so. And if it is not valid, then we're going to reset our hands. So get second motion controller reference and is valid. If it is not valid, then we go through. Cool, so that should go through to our grab component. Now what we can do is go to our weapon or pistol. And you'll see in here, if we compile, our grab component is broken. It says a warning, and it says on dropped does not have valid matching component. So we can right click and we do refresh nodes, and then refresh nodes, and that's not going to do it. So let's do brand new one. So select the grab component snap. We do first hand grabbed, and then first on dropped. That's probably because I renamed them actually, so that's probably what's happening there. And that's it for this section, although we will need a pause timer at the end of here. So add mapping context, we're going to do pause timer by function name. We'll come back to that. But what we want to do is select our grab component, and you'll see that we actually have access to our second on grabbed. So if we select this, we can bring it down, and we want to do the same thing with on dropped. So second on dropped. And for our first one, we're going to do set timer by function name. Actually, we'll do by event. So set timer by event. And we'll create a custom event. And we'll call this update rotation. So the benefit of doing this with the timer is that the weapon only updates its position when we're actually holding it. So if we could do an event tick to run this rotation code, but if you're not holding it, you don't need that tick to fire or the gun to try and update its rotation. So there's just no need to do that. So we got update rotation as our custom event. We're going to copy that and we're going to say on dropped, we're going to pause our timer by function name. And we're going to paste in our update rotation. We're going to do the same thing with the pause timer up here. So say when it's grabbed, we pause the timer, otherwise we get a loop. And then we do the same thing for releasing the second hand. So now what we can do is set up our actual rotation for our actor. And we can do that by dragging off this and doing set actor rotation. And we want to split our new rotation pin. So you can see, because we put these in our dropped or our variables, that we can actually access the variables through the grab component. We don't actually need to do this. We're going to call them directly just to keep it clean. But if you did need them, you can actually use this. I use this to pass through skeleton mesh hands so I can snap them to different locations, which works extremely well. But what we want to do is we want to make some space and set up the rotation X, Y, and Z. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag in our grab component snap. So we're going to get this, and we're going to search for motion controller aim. So get first motion controller aim. If you want the second controller to controller you would use that instead. But in this case, we're going to use first motion controller, and then do get first motion controller reference. And for the last one, we're going to get second motion controller reference. Make sure these are in the right order. First motion controller aim, reference, motion controller. Excellent. So the first one we're going to do is going to get rotation. We're going to break this, and then we can plug this into our pitch. So roll to pitch. The reason it's all messed up is because the axis that the weapon imports with through Unreal. So that's why roll goes to the pitch. And then first motion controller, we're going to find lookout location. So we need get world location. We're going to copy that down for our second motion controller. And we want to find lookout location. So the start is going to be our first controller position, and the target is going to be our second. We're then going to combine rotator, and then we're going to split our B. So we're going to right click on the pin, split, and for B, Z, yaw, we're going to do minus 90. This fixes our rotation for the weapon, for the way the motion controllers work. And from here, we're going to do a split from the return, like so. We're then going to have a make rotator. Actually, I don't think we need this make rotator, but I put it in just to keep it a little bit nice. So roll is going to go to roll, and then yaw to yaw. And in between here, we want from return value y to do multiply by -1. So we're inverting the rotation to roll, and then yaw to yaw. So now we compile file, save all. And I'm a bit of an idiot because I forgot to set up some stuff in our VR pawn. So if we hop back over to VR pawn. So in our actual VR pawn, we've got the try grab. I forgot to set up our motion controller aim and our try release. So for the aim, we want motion controller aim. So let me double check. It's the right one. Motion controller left aim. So yeah, so motion controller left aim. Plug that into motion controller aim. And for try release, we want our motion controller left. Controller left to go to the bottom here. And same for try grab for our right, so motion controller right aim. And then motion controller right. Motion controller right. Plug that into the bottom there. So now if we jump in and we test this, we can go up to our actors and we can choose these, and then we can roll and do exactly what we want. And you can see that it's based on the motion controller's forward position that gets you a better result. And then the aim just does that for us. So we can let go with the left mouse and it snaps back to our hand. And if we let go with the right controller, it snaps to our left hand, and then we can do the same thing. So that's pretty much it. It keeps it super nice, super simple, and goes all the way through. So what we're doing, oh, hey fever. So what we're doing is we're passing our motion controller aim, which is this one here, this component here. And we're doing that because of the roll axis on it. So if I add an arrow to this, so motion controller aim right, and we set this to visible in game, you'll see that when the motion control appears, it's pointing straight forward. So that's the roll position that we want. And then when we grab, it kind of moves up, which is really annoying because we want this lower down, but I haven't figured out a way to get that to do it. So once we grab, you can see we follow that arrow's rotation. But if I take that arrow component and we apply it to the motion controller directly, so motion controller right, what we get is a much bigger offset. So you'll see that it actually uses a different pivot. So that's what's actually causing the issue with the rotation forward in most grabbing. So we want that arrow to look forward and just tell Unreal that that's the rotation position that we're using for the first section. So that's essentially what we're doing. We're using the left aim position to get that roll a lot more tilted down, so you don't have to move the controller forward. If there's a way to move that even further forward, you could probably use that rotation and then pass it through to the pistol or through the actor. It'd just be the exact same thing. You would just need to change from motion controller component to a arrow component and just pass that through. But if anybody figures out how to do that, let me know, please. It'll be super helpful and absolutely awesome. But yeah, so this video was made possible by the GDXR VR template because I spent all my time trying to figure it out over there. And then with the help of Patreon, if you want to get access to the files, you can do so below. And yeah, make sure to drop by the Discord before I forget. We got 2,000 plus people in there all doing VR. So if you've got any questions, you need any help, I'm pretty sure somebody will be able to help you over there if I'm not there, which I normally am. So yeah, big thank you to all the Patreons for making this possible. And I will see you next time. Hope it helps. Bye.